Hey guys, Ash here again with Flight Sim Reviews, and I just wanted to take a look through the cockpit with you guys once on this great airplane Eaglesoft produced here. I know for new simmers, obviously you experienced guys will probably laugh at this, but to new simmers, I for one, when I was really early in this, was daunted by all the buttons and switches and knobs and just ridiculousness that, you know, you look in this cockpit and there must be 500 buttons. Well, they all are related to specific things in their area. So, as with all aircraft, everything is a flow. You're always flowing up and down the panel, making sure everything's set correctly so you don't miss anything. And there's always a flow. This airplane's a little different because it doesn't have an overhead panel in it, which is kind of strange. But Cessna's done that with a lot of their aircraft. The Mustangs like that, and some of the other CJs. But I just wanted to go over this really quick. I know I spent a lot of time on it, but the plane's fired up. There's no flight plan in, but basically over here you have circuit breakers, and you know, in real life, if you had some kind of electrical fault, one of them would pop. They're non-functional in the simulator. I think that probably has something to do. FSX has a lot of limitations on animations that each plane can have, so developers have to be really decisive about what they model and what they don't, because just opening a window can ruin, you know, the landing gear doors working properly, or the rudder pedals looking like they're moving, etc. So you know, this isn't a knock against the product. The product is extremely good. This is basically your amperage battery meter. So, well, on the opposite side you have the APU controls. So anyways, you've got your oxygen for your cabin pressure and your oxygen into the cabin. You always want it somewhere in between 18 and 15 or 14,000 psi. Passenger oxygen, that's just you leave it on auto. It's simulated, but there's no reason to play with it unless you had some sort of depressurization event. Most of that's automatic anyways. This is your cabin lights here. This is for your night settings. It dims all your glass displays and turns on all the tidal lights, all the electroluminescent behind all this. So this is your fuel control, pretty simple. You can cross feed between tanks, gravity feed the engines, batteries, generators, bus, the cross tie between the buses. This is external power. At airports they'll have little carts they drag out. They usually have Chevy 454s in them, and they turn generators to power planes. Most planes are 24 volts, not 12 volts like a car. If you want external power, you just click that. If we didn't have the APU running and it was available, it could power the aircraft instead of having to fire up the APU, which saves you maintenance on the APU. As with most planes, it cycles how many times they've been started and stopped more than hours when they get worked on. ECAS, that's your avionics switch for all your electronic glass cockpit. Engine start, I think you saw this in some of the previous videos. Ignition is the ignition in the turbines. If you're in bad weather, you want to switch it on so you don't have a flame out. Yeah, it's very rare in FSX that even that happens, but in real life you'll always turn the ignitions up into the on position if you're in icing or rain or fog. It just makes sure that the turbines stay lit and you wouldn't have a flame out. Fuel boost is a measure to help start the engines. Sometimes you need it when it's really hot and the fuel's evaporating too quickly. FADEC. FADEC is full authority digital engine control. It's basically fly-by-wire for the turbines. Back in the day, there used to have to be that poor guy back in the third seat sitting crosswise doing all these calculations and watching every parameter on the turbines, N1, N2, temperature, etc., adjusting everything. Essentially today we have what's called FADEC, and it literally is just a computer that runs the turbines. And FADEC is it's a help because you don't have to have that third guy and it's less to manage. But if the FADEC fails, the engine fails. So, and that's just kind of the way even pilots look at it in real life. It's very rare that it fails, but if there's any problem with FADEC, you lose the engine. even if it may not be an engine problem and it's just a FADEC. So it's kind of a give and trade there. Your FMC, you already saw, this is your radio panel for your nav and your comm, your transponder, your automatic direction finder, and your TCAS. TCAS is traffic collision avoidance system. It'll show you where other aircraft are, whether they're climbing or, obviously up on this screen, not down here, whether they're climbing or descending, which direction they're flying. These are your engine parameters. When I say FADEC has different parameters, you'll see that there's these lines across here. These are detents for the throttles. There's takeoff, climb, cruise, and each one has settings within the computers so that the pilots can worry about flying, not tinkering with their thrust all the time on the aircraft. So this aircraft doesn't have a really advanced FADEC. It works, but some of the newer aircraft literally will climb at best rates and everything else. This one still, you gotta fly it yourself. This is for your cruise on your this is for your cruise on your course. I'm sorry, your course on your autopilot and your heading. You can push sync either of them to the direction you're already going. Ground idle, high or low, engine sync. You've got your fog lights and runway lights under here. You can test emergency systems here with this guy. Make sure that the warnings are coming on and so on and so forth. And we'll flip her all the way around. Anyways, so we're back up here. I missed this. Standby power. That powers these standby instruments just in case your glass had a problem and went out. Landing gear. These are all heat icing controls. So you got pitot-static. This is a wing inspection light, so you can see if the leading edge is icing up. Windshield, air to blow on the windshield. Engine de-icing, stabilizer, and slat de-icing. We're going to move over to the first officer's seat here and show you the rest of this real quick, if we can. Flaps, throttles, hydraulics, your lighting system is right here. This is your pressurization system. This is showing relative pressure compared to outside and cabin altitude, whether it's going up or down. You can manually set it or you can leave it in auto. I just leave it in auto. It works just fine unless you have an emergency. The plane is nice. You can dump the pressure and it does drop the mass, or you can open the main exit and it will dump all the pressure out of the cabin. That's really nice. They simulated that. You got engine parameters here, again, if your glass would go out. These panels here are selecting what FMS you're going for. These are thrust reverser lights when they deploy. If you had an emergency with an engine, you would flip this up and it would stop the deployment. Fire, bottle discharge, and of course your standard autopilot. Heading, lock, nav, approach, back course, standby, bank, so it won't bank past a certain degrees. Vertical navigation, altitude hold, flight level change. Flight level change is something you use when you want to change altitudes but you want to maintain the same airspeed. It tries to pitch to correct it. Crossover, that's to change indicated airspeed into Mach number. It's a more accurate way of measuring speed at altitude. Vertical speed hold, obviously nose up, nose down. Autopilot, yaw damper, Mach trim, and selection on which PFD you want the autopilot to follow. I think, and of course you got your APU over here, whether it's bleeding air generator, the master for it, the starter, etc. I think that pretty much covers most of the cockpit. I explained these IRSs before in my last video, so I just thought I would run over this really quick, and the next video I think we'll take her up in the air and show you how she flies. Anyways, Eaglesoft has done a really good job modeling this cockpit. I'm really impressed with it, and 99% of the switches work and do what they're supposed to. There's just the random few here or there that don't do what they're supposed to, but that's mostly because they're either not needed or it's very hard, if not impossible, to code a weather radar into FSX. So I hope you enjoyed this informational video, and I hope you stay tuned for my next update. Thanks.